Hey everybody, we're gonna get going here in a second. Hey Peter, how are you? We are just waiting for the guests to join in and then we will get going. Hope everybody's doing good today. It is I think it's gonna be a blue sky day here in Seattle. What's it like in your neck of the woods? Anybody want to share where you're at and what your weather is? I may have frozen here. I'm not sure. Rainy and cool in central Texas. Partly cloudy in Eugene, Oregon. Hope everybody's having a good day today. We're just waiting for Matt to join in. Matt, I see ya. If you request to join, then we will. Then I'll just accept you in. Miller Turnery Co. Chilly, sunny. All right, Matt, I accepted. What's up? Hey, how's everybody doing? Matt, how are you, Matt?
Hey, how you doing?
Not too shabby. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
Right. Let's be here. Hey, thanks for joining me on this weekend chat. I've been doing quite a few of these here recently, and really looking forward to our conversation here today. Let me go ahead and set the stage for those who are seeing this for the very first time, and then we will get rocking. How's that sound?
Sounds great.
All right. So the goal of these conversations is really to introduce folks to makers who do interesting things or have interesting lives. And today we have Matt, who is a woodturner in his own right and also runs Woodturning Worldwide. So Matt, can you introduce yourself to the audience? Tell them a little bit about who you are as a human and what drives your passions.
Yeah, so Matt Deighton. I grew up north of Seattle. I live in Utah now. I got into, I love everything wood. I took a wood shop in high school and loved it. And I got into wood carving and got into our local wood carving club and then got into woodworking. And then I remember telling my wife one day, like, I have every kind of major tool in my wood shop except a lathe, but I don't see myself making bowls.
Right.
So I'm not going to get one. Like,
Right.
It doesn't make sense for me. And it was seriously like 3 months later I had one. So, and then all the woodworking projects kind of went by the wayside because wood turning was so much fun for me. But, I have no lack of passion for doing things. I have a lack of time. And so I love to get into lots of different things. Wood turning has been the one that has just kind of grasped me and never let go.
Yeah.
So some passions kind of come and go and ebb and flow, and I'll do some more than others, but wood turning has been the one that's kind of grabbed me. So I love making things. I love creativity. I love just the grains of wood. And we'll talk about this, I'm sure, a little bit later, but it's fascinating. Like, I love the wood grains, and some people love adding a lot of color, and that's awesome. But if you follow my account, you'll notice a lot of it is just really natural wood.
Yeah.
And I get called out sometimes. They say, "Hey, you're real round and brown over there." And
hey, wood's beautiful, so might as well highlight it.
well, and that's kind of what I figure. I'm like, if you're gonna paint it, it could be anything. It could be ceramic. It could be, metal. You don't know what the material is anymore. You lose kind of that natural, organic feel to it. But I think that adding some textures and colors can add a lot of creativity and character as well. So especially in very bland wood, right?
Yeah.
I know you use a lot of wood that just has amazing character in it. And so, I never see you painting yours because the grains, the character that's in the wood that you find is so fantastic. So
yeah, you know what? It's interesting. This is definitely about you, but I will respond to that. My passion is for really revealing the wood and making a form that is so simple that it actually recedes to the strength of the wood. The wood is really the star of the show. So I love your perspective because I'm aligned to it.
yeah.
Hey, let me ask you a question. You said you were born north of Seattle and now you're in Utah. Can you tell us a little bit about your childhood, when you moved, that type of thing, Matt?
Yeah, so my dad was an electrician, and so grew up in a family that working with your hands was highly valued.
Yeah.
And I think it's a value that society is losing a lot of, right? And so I grew up just trying to screw together any two pieces of wood I could find in his garage. And sometimes it was, 2x4s, and sometimes I found pieces of hickory, and he wasn't too impressed. And and so my father is he's incredibly talented. He can make anything, he can fix anything, and so I think I pulled a lot of my passion from him and just desires to be a part of something and to build and to grow in my skills. He's always learning. He's an amazing welder. He does wood turning as well. He's done some amazing woodworking. He worked in a junkyard straight out of high school, and so he's incredible at auto mechanics and just I think getting my hands dirty and just finding joy in the process was one of the things I learned from him. So I am number 4 of 6 children, and so it's kind of a crazy. I grew up in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and so very religious background, and I'm still active in that faith. I only have 3 kids. My parents keep telling me I need to have more kids and spread them apart. And
clearly, you're not busy enough. I mean, you need more kids, Matt.
3 is good with me. I love 3. My youngest is 6, and it's a perfect age to be able to. I grew up in the Boy Scouts of America. And so I was a Boy Scout, got my Eagle. And so I grew up camping and being outside, hunting, fishing, archery, shooting. We grew up right next to North Cascades National Park.
Beautiful.
And it is. And I'll be honest, I knew it was beautiful, but I never fully appreciated it when I lived there. I mean, you don't appreciate what you have in your own backyard.
That's right.
But we would go out on 50-mile hikes. We'd go out and camp, several days just out in the wilderness, and it was fantastic. You could fish. Here's just to give you a quick example. We were on a camp out, and we set up our tent in the middle of a creek on a little island in the middle of a creek, and about 2 a.m. all of a sudden, in just this horrendous noise, and I'm thinking, we're flooding. Right. The creek is flooding. We're going to drown. I'm in a body bag. I'm in a body bag pretty much right now when this water comes down. Right. So we're throwing our sleeping bag off, or ripping out of the tent, and we realize the salmon are running. Oh. And these are these salmon that are, they are massive. Yeah. And they're running up this creek, and they're so big that they're about this high out of the creek bed. And so we sat there for about 45 minutes, and you could just reach over and go and flip one out onto the shore and then flip it back in. Right. And so, you see those documentaries where bears are doing that. Here we are with our flashlights at 2 a.m. catching these massive salmon. And that's where I grew up. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's kind of like one of those life experiences where you'll remember it forever, right? Just because it's so rare, but it's so elemental to, nature, really, right?
I think that some of those have helped me just appreciate nature more. It's what recharges my batteries now. And that's why I'm kind of stressing out these days, because we haven't been able to get out and go anywhere. Yep. And so that's been my focus. Okay, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? And we've been talking about going down in Utah. We're talking about going down to Goblin Valley. And it's these kind of hoodoos that are like 6, 8 feet tall that are just sticking straight out of the ground, and just thousands of them. And you can kind of run around. So I've never been there. We're going to take our kids. I just need to get out into nature, but I miss the trees. Utah has some phenomenal national parks, but it doesn't have the trees of where I grew up.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I think about Utah, can you describe the topography of Utah for the audience? It looks like we've got folks from Europe and Iran and a couple other areas. So describe your current home.
Yeah, so Utah is kind of interesting because there's kind of a main valley that runs down the northern middle part of Utah. There's a lake on one side, and then there's kind of a big mountain range. And there are some kind of beautiful trees and lakes and things out there. But we're kind of like slammed into this valley.
Right.
And then it's desert on the one side and then desert on the far other side. And then if you go down south, you have some phenomenal national parks, but it's very desert national parks, right? Where it's huge gorges and like those hoodoos that, the ones in some of the parks go up 200 feet straight up, these pillars. There's only 2 places in the world that have those. I think one of them is Iran as well. And then, so some of that's it's just beautiful, amazing hiking around here, amazing, hunting and whatnot, and some fishing. But yeah, nothing speaks to me more than being in a forest just filled with massive trees.
Yeah, I tell you what, it's, stepping into a forest, everything goes quiet except for what's happening in that forest. It's its own environment. It has its own smell and sounds. Gosh, I can hear you there, no doubt.
Some people dream about having bigger houses. I dream about being further away from those people.
Yeah, it's funny. Before we had our third child, I had almost convinced my wife that we were going to build a tiny house. And, we were going to live in a tiny house and basically live close to nature. And then we found out we were pregnant, and that kind of changed a little bit. but living close to the bone is, there's something to be said about that. And, doing it in nature is, it's inspiring. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question. I want to learn a little bit about you as a wood turner. You mentioned that time is really a premium, and you don't have much of it. I think many of the audience here can relate to that. When you think about wood turning in general, let me start by asking, do you consider yourself an artist, a woodworker, a craftsman? How do you have any thoughts to that?
I don't know. I feel like throwing a title on myself is kind of I don't know. That's a difficult one. Here's what I will say. I always felt like I was an artist, but I was never great at drawing.
Mm-hmm.
I was never great at a lot of the things that you would normally think an artist, right?
Right. And
it wasn't until I found, wood carving was one of the things I was like, oh, maybe I'm kind of an artist in wood carving, but it takes so long. I mean, I'd have carvings that would take me over 100 hours.
Yeah.
And then I'd always put blood, sweat, and tears, and especially the blood, right? Blood was always a part of my projects. And my wife graduated in athletic training, and so she stitched me up all the time. And but I always felt like, yes, but it takes so long. And I got into wood turning, and it's so smooth and so quick, and you're able to create and carve and make beautiful and sometimes perfect things. The shapes and it was the first time where I was like, I've always felt like an artist, and this is where I feel like my artistry is.
Yeah.
And so I totally revel in the concept that you can make something just to be itself, right? It doesn't have to have a purpose to be beautiful. And what's interesting is I don't feel like the world understands that in a lot of ways. They fully grasp paint on canvas as art, and that it has no purpose but to bring joy or to inspire the mind, right? And that is art, and that's fine. And sculptures as well, but sculptures out of bronze, right, or clay. And for some reason, wood is usually not included in that. for
It's
some
weird,
reason.
right? It's
And I
weird.
think, yeah, I think part of it is that there isn't, maybe some of the wood sculptures or carvings that are 2,000 years old have broken down.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't seem like there's a longevity to it,
Yeah.
that it's not classic art. And so it's kind of been pushed away in the art world. I've submitted several pieces to art galleries for shows, and I'm still hoping to get in one day. And you'll always see like kind of the token 1 or 2 wood pieces, and they're kind of shoved in the corner in the side room. They're never put prominently on display, and it's fascinating that people see art in one way, but just to have something that's beautiful that you can appreciate, that you love, that I feel like is art. So I do love utilitarian pieces. I mean, I love making things that people use, they hold, like pizza cutters and shaving brushes and bowls and things like that people use on a daily basis. But then just to make something just to be beautiful, I think is an incredible thing as well.
It's interesting you say that, because I think, folks I have 2 thoughts around that. One is wood, because we build so much with wood. I think folks naturally align wood with utility, right? And then secondly, I think what I oftentimes hear folks say about, things that are just made to be beautiful is, what is that for? And I think that's getting to your point, right? Is what's it for is to please the eye, right? And to be aesthetically beautiful. That's what it's for. That's its purpose. But yeah, I hear you there. Definitely. So you artfully walked around the question around whether you're an artist or a craftsman, but deep down, I think what I heard you say is you have an artist spirit and an artist soul, and through wood turning, that had a voice. Is that accurate to say?
That's accurate. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have a piece that you're the most proud of, or are you the type that's like every piece is just taking you a step further and you don't kind of align with that?
I know I definitely do have some favorite pieces. It's usually like I always have like some of the classic favorites that I've made, and then it's always like, and the last one that I made.
Right.
Yeah, the most recent one. Right. And then that one always kind of fades in glory in my mind, and then some remain, right? And I'll say this, like I always know which one's my wife's favorites because they remain out and kind of displayed, and then the ones that aren't are displayed for a little bit, and all of a sudden it's in a drawer.
Somewhere,
and I'll be like,
right?
And then like I'll open a drawer up and I'll be like, oh, that's where that went, and that is not one of her favorites.
Right. Noted, right? Noted.
Yeah, let me grab. Actually, I have one of my favorites is here. I used to just like give all my pieces or sell all my pieces. I'm like, you know what? So people would come over and they'd say, well, show me something that you've made, and all I would have is the rejects. All the ones that are like, not quite finished, whatever. And so you're like, well, I mean, I don't know this one, but like, don't judge from this one.
Right,
this one's terrible.
Like, that's not my best work, but here's some of what I got.
Yeah. Let me go grab. You talk for a second. Let me go grab. It's just right here. One of my favorite pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, gang, if you're in the audience, go ahead and feel free to post some questions in the chat, and I'll try to squeeze those in. I see folks from Brazil, certainly many from the U.S. Hey, Matt, what you got?
Okay, so and I'm not saying this because you're the one interviewing me. I love hollow forms.
Yeah.
And like that's for me, it's one of the artistic ones where people are like, so is that an urn?
Right.
No.
Right.
So what does it do?
It does water in it, right?
Yeah. So this is.
Yeah.
So I mean, it has massive. This is elm burl, and was harvested a quarter of a mile from here. But I like this one. I just love because it's just it has the natural, it has, you know, the perfect, it has the grains, it has, and when you're doing the big voids, man, you got to be consistent.
You do.
It is super obvious when you're not, but I will say there is an aspect to it that is easier when you have big voids because you can see.
That's right.
You can see your blade cutting, and you go, "Oh, there's a little bump right there. I'll just go back and clean that up."
Yeah, let me get that.
So it's tough because everyone can see every imperfection on the inside, but it's a little easier to where you can see it as well as you're going, and you can clean everything out.
That's
So
right.
I have 3 more big burls from this that I want to do a few more of these.
Yeah, that's a beautiful piece. And wow, everything you just said about those large voids, it can be a real blessing and it can be a challenge that you grow from, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what's so amazing about Instagram is just being able to connect with people from all over the world.
Yeah.
So Phil Irons reached out to me when I had posted a couple of these videos, and he was like, "Hey, super cool. Let me give you some tips." And like, at first I was like, yeah, okay, no, you're way better than I am. So yes, no, that's totally fine. And so he kind of walked me through a few things, and one of the things he said is he's like, I never would have turned that free. He would have saran wrapped the whole thing, shrink wrapped it, right?
Yeah.
And I did. I turned it free, which was cool in that you never had to stop for shavings because the shavings just blow right out of it.
Right.
But yeah, there's some really risky spots here that, I mean, could have easily blown out, but slow and steady. That's one of the patient ones. That's one of the ones where I was like, this may take me a long time, and that's totally okay. And I will go until I'm losing focus, and then I'll stop.
Yep.
And sometimes, like I did one a few years ago. I was trying to hurry up before something, and it's never a good idea. And I was like, I'll cut this one corner. And I'd already spent a couple hours. I mean, I was like 4 hours into this project. And I was like, I'll cut this one corner. It'll save me 15 minutes.
Yep.
And the whole thing just, boom, blew apart. And I was, like, I knew better. And so I actually printed out a sign, and it's above my lathe now, and it says, do it right or put someone else's name on it.
Man, that is right. Let me ask you this, because you just touched on something, and it connects back to your comment about really not having a lot of time. How do you, knowing that wood moves, right, as it drives, it moves, when you have to stop, right, to attend to life, what do you do to preserve it and minimize the movement, or do you not worry so much about that?
So a lot of the wood I've been doing is bone dry. I've been able to collect quite a bit of wood, and so when I go out, and I'm in Utah, and so it is dry here.
Right.
You're up in Washington. If you leave your clothes in the washing machine for a couple hours, they start getting mildew on them. You can't.
Right.
Yeah, you got to go. You drive around. You got roofs with moss on them, and we don't. Like it is so bone dry here that unless I'm harvesting it that day and going to turn it the next bit, my wood goes dry pretty quick, and so I don't have a lot of that movement. I love movement in wood. I love warping, and so I've done quite a few. I don't have one in here. Vessels, and maybe I'll go grab one where I'll cut really thin fins. Like I'll make my vase shape, cut really thin fins, and then let it dry, and it warps. Yeah. And just the movement of wood is very cool, right? No other material does that. You don't cut metal and then expect it to move in a very natural way, or clay. And so just allowing the wood to do and be what it is, I think is pretty cool. It, like with any wood turning, any woodworking, you have to work around what the wood is. You accept it for what it is. You say, I understand you're an imperfect material, and I will do my best to help you be as perfect of a whatever as possible. I'm building a giant playhouse in our backyard right now, which has taken up my last 2 weeks. That's what I do in all the free time right now with my 3 little kids. We're building a playhouse. And it doesn't matter. Every type of woodworking project, wood is imperfect. And so you're working around these imperfections. But the imperfections is what makes it such an amazing material.
Isn't that amazing? That's much like humans, really, right? It's our imperfections that really create the texture that makes us interesting, and also allows us to keep striving to be better at being a human and better community members and all that goes with it. Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree.
it's not the things that we're perfect at that people love us for.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. If
That's
you say,
right.
hey, your wife, what is it that you really love about your wife? It's the quirky, it's the different, it's the imperfections, it's what makes them human. Yeah. And that's, yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, I totally hear you there. Let me ask you a question. Besides wood turning, do you have any other hobbies? I do want to start asking a little bit about Woodturning Worldwide because that's a heck of a platform. But what other hobbies do you have besides wood turning?
Skiing. I love to ski.
Uh-huh.
So skiing is a hobby. I kind of like, I do, I would have a million hobbies. If I had the time and money, I'd have a million hobbies. And so I will get into things heavily, and then I'll kind of, like I said, ebb and flow. So there was axe throwing. I don't know if this is a national thing or just in Utah, but axe throwing places have become really big.
Yeah.
Is that everywhere? Okay, so just everywhere.
Yeah.
And I threw so many knives into my dad's cedar tree growing up, and I broke a couple of his machetes. I spent a lot of time, and so I've always kind of enjoyed that. And so I built a big stand out here, and I'm there's houses all around me, so I don't really have the room for this. I didn't build a cage around it, and I got pretty good at throwing axes, and that was like a month-long hobby where I just and then one time it slipped underneath and it bounced and then went another 20 feet and stuck into the fence at 7 feet high. and I thought, maybe this isn't a good idea. Maybe I should
dial it back a bit.
And so I actually dismantled it and kind of put it away. And now I have a friend I can go over and use his, and he's got a lot more room. And so, but I don't know, just any random things like that where I get into. Right now, I'm getting into bow hunting.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm just that is such a deep world that I'm trying to learn so much about. And I don't know, it's been a while since I've been a complete newbie at something. And so that's been kind of interesting. But
that's interesting you say that. So I grew up in Florida, and I wrestled. And one of the guys I wrestled with, he was a bow hunter. And what he would do is, he would eat the alligators. That's kind of what he did. And so what he and I would do is we would go to a river or a pond or something like that, and we would hunt alligators with a bow. And he would basically shoot it in its cranium, and he had this big compound bow. And I would dive in and I would pull it up on the bank, and then we would harvest it. And,
get out of here! Get out of here!
Yeah, that was that. One story I want to tell you.
That's like the show Swamp People.
Yeah, right. So one day he showed up at my house and he was like, "Hey Perry, you want to go?" This was really well before cell phones, and so people would just show up. And he showed up at my house and he said, "Hey Perry, you want to go hunt?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do that." And he's like, "I got to show you something." And he opened up his trunk, and inside of his trunk was a live alligator. And that was completely common for the type of guys I hung out with, but probably not advisable in everyday life. No doubt about that. But let me ask you a question. You've got a rather massive following on Instagram, and you're an influencer within the wood turning community for really showing off other people's work. And I'm interested, and I'm sure other people are interested. What got you started with Woodturning Worldwide? Woodturners Worldwide.
Yeah, so Woodturners Worldwide got started. I was assisting with the Utah Woodturning Symposium,
Yeah.
and helping them in their promotion. And so I'd get them on the local TV and I'd get them in the newspaper. And I said, what we really need to do is we need to start reaching out to a younger audience.
Yeah.
You know, daytime TV is going to get some of the older retired guys, which is great. And that's our demographic, and the newspapers as well, and magazines. But we need to hit a younger demographic. And I was sitting there, the only one that wasn't gray haired in the room.
Yeah.
And everyone's looking at me like, yeah. I mean, people just get old enough and then they just join. It's just what happened.
Right.
And I'm like, no, we need to get out there more. And so it was that, coupled with when I was on social media, I would see people who, quite honestly, sometimes it was dangerous, or sometimes they're just reinventing the wheel, where they're like, hey, look, I made this. And you're like, cool, let's talk about shape. Let's talk about, how to make things flow. And there's some amazing stuff out there that a lot of people had never seen, because they didn't go to clubs or symposiums, or they didn't, they weren't a part of the culture of wood turning that was with some of the artists of the old age, right?
Yep.
Ones that, had been around for a while. And there was a lot of people that were just in their garage and bought a lathe and were just kind of figuring it out. And I thought, man, there's so much knowledge and really cool, inspiring things out there. I want to take and inspire other people, like from what has inspired me. And so I felt like I had this bridge in the old world and a bridge in the new world. And I could be that connection. And so I said, I want to promote people that don't do it themselves, to be quite honest, into this new world. And I had started making connections with some like really great wood turners, and I would talk to them about, hey, this is social media, this is how you use it. So I'll take one step back. Professionally, I do public relations. I did at the time public relations, social media, and marketing. That, like, promotion, right? That was it. And honestly, a big part of that is you're not promoting yourself. I mean, unless you are the brand. I was working at Ancestry.com, and I worked there for almost 10 years. And so I ran all of their stuff, different campaigns and whatnot, but it was always promoting other people. So for me to promote other people, it's just natural. Like, for me to promote myself, to get in front of the camera, completely unnatural. Like, I can do it, and I do fine, I think, but I love helping other people and helping them grow and promoting them. And so I started reaching out to these larger wood turners that I became friends with, and teaching them how to do it. And they said, look, I don't have the time. I don't have the time. I'm a wood turner or a woodworker. I'm not a social media technology. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And I said, well, I am. I can. I will. And I'll promote. And so that's what I started doing, was just promoting these people and how to do things, and kind of techniques behind the scenes and in their work, right? Like, why is something beautiful? And when you're beginning, you look at something, you say, I understand that this is beautiful, but I don't know why. I don't know why my mind says that is beautiful and that is desirable, and I want to pick it up and I want to hold it. And a lot of times that's shape, and shape is never something that we talk about in a normal world.
Yep.
And what I'm kind of sad seeing is we're moving into an era where a lot of art is being taken away from schools.
Yeah.
And art, the problem is art and understanding design and shape and color and flow is what makes the world beautiful.
Yeah.
You can look at a house and you can say that was designed beautifully, and that was someone who understands art. I've had people tell me that art is worthless and we should cut all the arts. But when you watch a TV show that's beautifully done, the person behind the lens of the camera understands art and composition. And so art is a part of like, if you can get kids, young ages, understanding beauty, art, flow, composition, which is all the same principles in wood turning and film, to be honest, right? The 1/3, 2/3 rule, and there's a lot of things.
The math.
Yeah. So when you can do that and help them understand how things flow and are beautiful, then the world around us becomes beautiful. I mean, we could be very utilitarian. Houses could be built cheaper and just as structurally sound, but very, very ugly.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say that, because my wife and I, in Florida, a lot of the houses, well, probably in every state, a lot of the houses, really what you see when you drive up is the garage. You're right. You see this big garage door, and we've always aspired to not have that, because there's nothing wrong with it, of course. But when we think about it, a home, as you drive into it, should be aesthetically pleasing, right? It should be welcoming, and you almost feel like, I'm here.
Yeah.
And that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And that's true for so many things about the world itself, is that, you know, form is king or queen, right? But one of the things that we should be cognizant of is it's also thoughtful, right? You have to be thoughtful. And, you know, wood turning is just another aspect of a thoughtful existence, right? Is to be thoughtful with what you do.
Yeah. Someone mentioned music on here as well, and I think that's a great example.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's part of it is helping your mind open up to being outside the box and not fitting just in a form and doing what everyone's done. This is a controversial topic I'll bring up right now, but there was a study that was done that says valedictorians, they did a study of like 4,000 valedictorians, and they said these people must have gone on and done amazing things. And what they found was none. They said not one of them went on to actually do anything remarkable. I mean, they had jobs, and I'm sure they did great at their jobs, but valedictorians are very good at finding out the formula of how to be successful within a framework. And so, you know, an accountant is a very good, because there's rules, you follow the rules. There's no big outside the box, creative, change the world. They are not change the world people. They are very much, I understand the rules so well, I will follow them, and that's what I will do. They said, you are far more likely to become a millionaire if you are C's, like C average in high school, because your mind doesn't fit in like everything else. It doesn't fit into this structure. You see the world in a different way. You want to change the world and make it better and different, and that's where you're able to build businesses that actually solve problems, not fit into frameworks. And artists and people that do kind of what we're doing have a different mindset, right? We don't usually fit into the framework, which is always fascinating when you do get some of those turners that like West Pilley or some of those that are more machinists.
Yeah.
And those ones blow my mind because they understand it's like a completely different mind than the artist. It's I am so detail oriented and I know all the steps and I can create the tools that I need, that I can do these phenomenal things with wood. And for someone to have an art mind and that detail oriented engineering technical mind is very rare. I will never have that. That is not me.
Yeah. Yeah, I can appreciate those types of guys and girls for sure. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. To run a platform like Woodturners Worldwide is, you know, when you have that many folks, there's that many comments, that's that many DMs. It can be a lot. How do you balance all of that?
Yeah, and I have found a way that I'm able to take short bits of time and kind of break it up. And there'll be times where people will say, hey, and like they'll ask a question and I really try to take the time and answer questions, but I am not the source. I am a source, but I want people to be involved in local clubs as well. And so I'm always pushing people like, hey, that is a great question. What you really need to answer that one is go find a local club, and I'll actually go on like AEW's website, find a local club, and send them the information as well. Yeah. But what I've done, and this kind of blows people's minds, I actually go in, you know how you can save posts on Instagram? So I will go in, like right now I'm saving posts for April that I really like, and I'm posting ones that I saved from August of last year.
Yeah.
And so I have a schedule that I've built out, which is, shoot, what is that? Like 7 months. So I'm 7 months behind, which I usually almost never post right away when I see something. It's usually when that person doesn't have very many followers at all. What I never want to get to is where people are like, man, this guy just posts stuff that I'm already seeing in my feed. This doesn't help me at all. I want people to have forgotten about it and then get re-exposure to it and be like, oh, that's amazing. And they may have seen it before. They may not have. And so that I kind of run it that way as well, where I'm constantly trying to show new and different. It's hard being the only person. I wish I had a team member that would post as well, that would take some weight off. There's one thing that helps a lot for me, and when people tag me in their stories, it takes like 2 clicks and I can share their work.
Yeah.
If I go to share it in a normal post, it may take me 5 minutes to download it and organize it. I've had some posts that have taken me over a half hour to prepare because I've gone through and gotten the photos and cropped them down and written up a huge explanation. And there's times where that makes sense, and I do the whole process for one big post, and they do well, but it takes a lot of time out, right? Here's what's kind of crazy. I got to the point before where I was posting 5 times a day.
Uh-huh.
And if I would post 5 times a day, I was getting 1,000 followers a week.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's great, but I burned out. I burned out really hard. And so I had to find a balance between, how much can I post and time I can put into it, and then the value that kind of comes from it. Like, I can put a ton of time and I get a ton of value, but it's not worth it to me in the end. I just completely burn out, and then I don't post at all, and then everything drops. Because consistency in social media is key. So it helps me when people tag me in their story. So if you're like, hey, this one's great, and I'm going to post it and tag him, and then I can just dink, and I put it in my story, and people get a lot of exposure that way. Sometimes I don't even know that people are out there, so people will reach out and say, hey, just want you to know that I'm here. And that's great. Sometimes I'm like, a lot of people will reach out and say, hey, help me out. Like, can you post? Like, share my work. Here's the thing I made. Share my work. And I'll look on their page, and they don't share any of their own wood turning. And I'm wondering, like, why do you want me to share this? I'm trying to figure out. It's because my communication background, very strategic in the sense of I find very hyper targeting, and there's always a strategy and a purpose. And so people need to find their purpose in why they're posting on Instagram. Is it just, hey, this is a place that I like to store my photos so I can show people if I need to? Do you sell your work? Do you want to get into a gallery? Do you just want your friends and family to kind of see what you're doing? If it is, hey, I'm selling my work or I'm building a brand, then you need to start with one, content that includes yourself, right? So people get to know you as a brand, but it needs to be very specific. So you can pick 1, maybe 2 topics. If you're like, I do wood turning and bow hunting, you might be able to add those kind of in there together, or hiking and wood turning, because the nature part of it works. But you can't, don't start sharing photos of your kids at the playground, and then a wood turning one, and then a photo, you can't a photo at your work or a nice sunset and then a wood turning one, and then hope to build your wood turning business. Yeah. People like one track, they like to be able to go to a burger joint and get a burger. They don't want to buy tacos there, for the most part, right? And so you need to kind of figure out who your audience is, and then create content that follows that specific audience member. So you kind of, in mind, you say, well, my audience would be this type of person who wants to buy, and this is what they're interested in. Then you don't make content that shows detailed things that a woodturner would be interested in. Right. You talk about more general concepts in 101 education that someone who has no idea about woodturning finds it interesting, is like, oh, that's really cool. I've now bonded with you. It's called a parasocial relationship, where you bond with someone that you have never met in real life. You feel like you have a relationship with them. You're more likely to buy from them. You're more likely to spend more money with that individual and to have repeat purchases, because you feel like that is a friend, even though that person may have no idea who you are personally. There's a lot of businesses now that are at-home artisans, craftsmen that do knife making, leather working, any of those types of things that would never be able to open a shop downtown.
Right.
But because they've created a presence and they have focused on their audience correctly to a beginner or to, you know, someone who can appreciate it but doesn't want to get super nerdy into the details. You know, they just want to purchase something. I've seen knife makers on Instagram that are 6 months behind.
Yeah.
And they're selling knives for $600. Just knives, just, you know, and they're months, 6 months behind on an order. And so they're like, hey, if you want to order something 6 months from now, and they are busy.
You'll get it in the mail 6 months from now. Right.
They are as busy as they want to be, and they make great money because they've been able to build a brand. Taking mediocre photos isn't going to do it. This is a very visual medium, and Instagram is very visual. So like woodworking works well in Instagram. And then these are just a couple of tips I wanted to throw out to people. And then any type of new platform. So right now, Reels is the big one. And any new platform you need to just fully embrace, get in it, try it out, break it, try new things, delete, add a different one. And any new type of feature, that company pushes heavily.
That's right.
Because they want engagement. The longer that someone is engaged, the more engaged, the longer they are on the platform, the more ads they see, the more money they make.
Right.
And so that's what they want. They talk to shareholders in terms of how long people have been on their platform. Like, oh, the average person is on our platform for 1 hour and 22 minutes, up from 1 hour and 15 minutes. And everyone's like, whoa, that's amazing. Like, that is incredible. And you're like, well, it's only a couple more minutes on average. Yeah, that is a lot more ads they're seeing. That's a lot more money. That's what they like. And so they love that engagement. So just any new thing, just say, I don't understand it. I don't know how it works. It doesn't matter. I'm going to go in. I'm going to break it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to fail. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to figure this out. If you can do that better than anyone else, you'll be bigger than anyone else. So that's kind of the cool.
You know, I like what you're talking about there because it's really having a strategy, right? And if your strategy is to grow, it's about honing your brand, knowing what your brand is, building relationships, right? Creating a relationship with the audience, and then really leaning as deeply into it. Oftentimes the accounts that are much larger, they blend reels, like video, and photos, and then they include themselves. Absolutely. I think for the maker, it's finding the time to do all of that and making the decision around, is this something I want to do, right? And that's always a balance within the strategy too. You bet. Yeah.
And like, does this bring me joy? Because if you hate it, then you're not going to do it. It's not going to work well for you, or it comes across very inauthentic.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're more of a wood turner, and you just post a photo and then you describe it, that makes good sense. But if you're someone who is energized by the process of producing content, that's great too, right?
And it doesn't even have to be you. If you have a significant other, or even maybe a teenager that loves that kind of stuff, you can say, hey, I'd love you to run this. This is what I'm kind of focused on. This is how I'd like to do it. I don't really have the time or ability to do it, all the time. And they'd be like, you're going to let me be on my phone more? Cool. and they could come out and just be like, oh, that part was really cool. And you're like, what, this cut that I'm making? Like, this is nothing. They're like,
that's
film it. And they go. And the thing with social media is it can be so bizarre on what really takes off. There can be, it's just like one video that all of a sudden gets, 500,000 views, and you're like, I don't understand why that one did so well. I wasn't even going to film that, and I just did randomly and posted it, and now that one got 500,000 views, and I just got 3,000 more followers off that. And so you never know what's really going to grab people. You always got good oil videos when you're like putting the oil on things, like people like that, or a nice big cut or big peels, coming out, that sort of thing. Like, there's some of those classic ones, but you just never know on some of those other things that like what's really going to grab people and get them excited about it, or just go viral. Sometimes you just hit it right. What you need to do is be consistent about doing all of the things right, and then you'll get one that goes big. And when people, they talk about it as the top 9. When you go into someone's profile and you look at the top 9, they have to be solid, which means every post, that you go has to be pretty solid post, because if they go your top 9, because of a cool woodworking video, and they see a bunch of sunsets, they're like, that's not what I want. You're not gonna get followers. This is not gonna work. But if they look and they're like, oh, there's a ton of cool content, this guy consistently produces great content, I will follow him.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Let me ask you this. I'm looking at the clock a little bit, and I could probably have this conversation for hours. But let me ask you this. And I'm going to kind of walk away from the Instagram aspect of it for a minute and kind of bring it back to you, Matt. Matt, so as you've gone through life, you mentioned your dad was, he has many skills, right? Multiple skills and he many passions. I can hear passion in your voice too. What have you identified to be the most important things in life to you? Like, if you could strip everything down, what's most important?
Oh, I mean, family.
Family.
It's because friends come and go, jobs come and go. The things, when you look at this, it's constantly a juggling act. And you don't want to drop any balls, but what you realize is some balls are made of wood, some balls are made of glass, some balls are made of metal. And so some balls break, and some balls are made of rubber. So some balls break and some balls bounce.
Right.
And family is one that breaks. If you don't do it right, that one breaks. Whereas a job, that one bounces. You can find another job, you can find another home, you can find a lot of things. And I guess I realized a long time ago that I think there was a day where I yelled at one of my kids for breaking something, and then all of a sudden I realized I love this kid way more than I love that object.
Right.
Why would I break my child when that child is far more important than that item that was broken? And then I realized everything I own will get broken.
Yeah.
It's just it's just how long do I get these items and they'll break and I'll get new ones or make new ones or whatever. But it's the people that I feel, it's those relationships, the connections that I feel are the most important.
Being intentional in the way that you care for those relationships. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So if there's anything that you would like to convey to the audience, and it could include woodturning, it can include social media, it could include, life learning, what would that be that you would like to articulate to those watching? So
I would say never stop learning. That's the big thing, and take criticism well. So ask for feedback and never stop learning. It's easy to just say, oh, I know how to make bowls, done. And you're like, well, there's now that you can turn and you can use tools, how can you refine things to make them absolutely utilitarian and fully beautiful? And so never stop learning. Always look at other people and how they're doing it. You can learn something from everyone. No matter who they are, you can always learn something from everyone. And so never stop learning. Ask questions. Dig into it. If you ask, here's the fascinating part with any professional woodturner. If you're like, hey, are you an expert woodturner? Very few of them will say yes. And most of them will say no. And you can ask any of them, hey, what if someone dropped out on a demo today and you had to come into it, which demo would you be the most afraid to do? And you have woodturners that are like, oh man, this one. And you're like, you are a phenomenal woodturner, but those are the demos that you would never do. They are amazing in some things, but even these people are turned day in and day out. But they will tell you, there's a lot I don't know, and I'm still learning about this form. And so, yeah, for some of us to come in after 5 years and be like, I know everything about woodturning is kind of arrogant. And so you have to take a step back and say, I will always learn. I will always grow. I will always be involved and question and try to improve. But that's true with just life in general. That's right.
Yeah, you touched on two things right there. Approaching life with humility and approaching life with a sense of curiosity and interest in learning and learning from others. Yeah. Yeah. So what's on the horizon for you going forward?
Yeah, we did our big Woodturners Worldwide Symposium, and that did really well. I've been kind of talking to the AAW back and forth, and I'd like to work with them more. It didn't work out this last time. We have another big symposium coming up in January. So if you go to woodturnersworldwide.com, you can sign up for our email list. We only email people when it's like time for the actual symposium. And so you get the kind of the first, we always do a launch special. Mm-hmm. And so you'll get that first lowest price launch special. And so you can go sign up there, but that's going to be in January 2022. And so I'm looking forward to that. Like what kind of things should I be doing? How can I be helping the community and building people up? Remote demonstrations are huge right now, but there's a lot of people that haven't gotten into them. And so I've been helping people kind of get going on remote demonstrations and helping them kind of grow their own following. And so for me, it's rising tide lifts all ships. How can I continually help woodturners be better, help people get better exposure, help woodturning in general just have more exposure? I think woodturning is becoming more and more of a popular hobby. Yep. And I would love to see more and more people get into it. It's not like we're going to run out of urban trees that are cut down and thrown away. Like they cut down, throw away so many trees every day. Like there's plenty of wood for people to like go and get that would just rot and be creative and open their minds. And so that's, I don't know, it's just always what I'm thinking about. How can we help more people open their minds and get their hands dirty?
That makes sense. Can you say your website one more time in case folks missed that?
So woodturnersworldwide.com.
Woodturnersworldwide.com. Okay. Matt, before we go, I want to thank you. I want to thank you just for being a good guy. I want to thank you for the work that you do to promote the community. Is there anything else that you want to touch on before we head out?
I just appreciate the community, and like I was able to build this account off of some of the like, I don't know, I've had some negative comments where like, you just share other people's work. I'm like, I feel like I'm promoting people's work, but it is an amazing community. It's a very positive place. Instagram, I feel, is especially. Sometimes Facebook gets a little negative, but it's a great place to just go and be a part of a community, and I just love everyone that's a part of it and the work that they share. And I just, I don't know, I guess for me, I want to thank you and then thank the community for just being so great and being so dang creative. They inspire me all the time.
My man, no doubt about that. I'm super inspired by everybody, and your account is a constant source of inspiration. So thank you so much for joining today. Really appreciate you taking the time, and I hope the rest of your weekend is amazing.
Hey, you too. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Matt. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.